I'm
Great, just
alone,
what I
and my
needed
car
tonight.
died.
I can't
The
believe this is
CEO
happening
shouted
now.
into her phone,
Okay,
her
stay
voice
calm,
trembling.
think.
The night had fallen quickly over the winding highway outside San Francisco, and the trees cast long, eerie shadows across the road. She pressed the "end call" button, frustration mixing with panic. She had been used to control every decision, every detail of her life, but now, stranded on the roadside with her luxury sedan refusing to start, she felt a vulnerability she hadn't experienced in years. Her hands shook as she tried to restart the engine. The dashboard lights flickered and died. Nothing. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she stepped out, trying to get a better signal, hoping some random driver would pass by. The cool night air did little to calm her racing heart. She had been driving back from an important business dinner, exhausted yet proud of the deals she had closed. Now, every achievement seemed trivial in the face of this simple, inescapable helplessness. She hugged her coat tightly, wishing she had never taken this detour through the quiet, nearly deserted route. Minutes felt like hours. Cars rarely passed this far from the city center, and the darkness seemed alive, closing in around her. She gripped her phone like a lifeline, scrolling contacts in desperation. Friends, assistants, even security, none could arrive fast enough. She was alone, truly alone. A pang of loneliness she had long suppressed gnawed at her chest. She realized that all her power, her status, and her wealth meant nothing when faced with a simple, human problem, needing someone to help. Then, suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance. Relief surged, but so did caution. Who could it be at this hour? The vehicle approached slowly and stopped beside her. A man stepped out, tall and sturdy, dressed in worn jeans and a grease-stained shirt. He carried a toolbox, and the faint scent of motor oil followed him. Calm, confident, and strangely comforting, he smiled and asked if she needed help. I think so," she stammered. Pride and embarrassment clashed inside her. She had never been helped by anyone, at least not in a situation where she couldn't control the outcome. She had managed boardrooms, investors, and crises, yet here she was, humbled by a broken car and a stranger's goodwill. He knelt by the hood and began examining the engine with professional precision, muttering to himself in a rhythm that somehow made the night less frightening. She watched, fascinated and slightly disarmed by his focus and the ease with which he handled the problem. The harsh reality of her helplessness softened as she realized she was witnessing competence and care in action, a rare sight in her high-powered world. As the man worked, she couldn't help but notice his quiet confidence, the way his hands moved over the engine with steady expertise. For the first time that evening, her racing heart was not entirely from panic, there was curiosity, interest, even admiration. Little did she know, this unexpected encounter on a lonely highway was about to change more than just the fate of her car. It was about to shift the course of her life. The mechanic wiped his hands on a rag, leaving smudges of grease that looked like badges of experience. "Looks like your alternator's dead," he said, his voice calm but reassuring. The CEO furrowed her brow, a mix of relief and worry crossing her face. She had heard the words, dead, and broken, too many times in her corporate life, but this time, it applied to something much more personal, her car, and, by extension, her helplessness. She leaned against the hood, watching him work, noting the careful way he manipulated the tools. Each motion seemed deliberate, precise, and somehow comforting. He explained what he was doing, pointing out wires, bolts, and the tiny mechanics that she had never bothered to understand. She nodded along, trying to follow his instructions, but mostly, she just listened. There was something soothing about his voice, steady and unhurried, a stark contrast to the fast-paced commands and meetings she was accustomed to. "You're pretty calm for someone stranded in the middle of nowhere at night," he joked lightly, glancing at her. I guess I'm not used to being this vulnerable," she admitted, surprising herself. Vulnerable wasn't a word she ever used in the boardroom. It wasn't part of her vocabulary. Yet here, in the glow of the streetlights and under the watchful eyes of the trees, it fit perfectly. He smiled knowingly, as if he understood more than she was willing to admit. "Vulnerability's not always a bad thing," he said. "Sometimes, it's how you find the people who matter." She laughed softly, a sound she hadn't realized she missed. The tension in her shoulders eased as they exchanged stories, small, insignificant ones at first, about the city, the weather, even favorite childhood memories. Hours seemed to compress into minutes. Laughter came easily, breaking the monotony of fear and uncertainty that had filled the earlier hours. The night didn't feel threatening anymore, it felt alive with possibility. As he tightened the last bolt and checked the engine one final time, their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, a spark neither expected. The CEO's heart fluttered, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just gratitude for saving her car, it was something deeper, something primal and human. She realized she was drawn to him in a way that went beyond admiration or relief. "I think we're good to go," he said finally, stepping back and wiping his hands. The car purred to life immediately, its engine steady and strong, as if echoing the sudden steadiness she felt in her chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice quieter than before, tinged with something more than politeness. "Don't mention it," he replied with a smile. "Just be careful out there." For a moment, silence settled over them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, full of potential. The night, once threatening and isolating, had shifted. She was beginning to understand that sometimes, fate intervened in the most unexpected ways, and that help often came from the most unlikely sources. As she got back into the driver's seat, she caught his gaze once more. Something had changed. She didn't yet know what, but the thought lingered, perhaps being stranded here wasn't a disaster after all. It might just be the beginning of something entirely new. By the time the car roared back to life, the CEO's heart was racing for reasons that had little to do with the vehicle. She offered the mechanic a ride to the nearest diner, almost on impulse, surprised by her own boldness. He glanced at her, raised an eyebrow, and then nodded. There was something about the ease of their connection that made her forget the usual formalities she maintained with everyone else in her life. The diner was a small, cozy place with neon lights that flickered gently in the evening air. The smell of coffee and freshly baked pastries filled the space, instantly relaxing her. They slid into a booth, and she found herself studying him, not just his face, which was rugged and handsome, but the way he carried himself. Confident yet unpretentious, the kind of man who didn't need a title to define him. He ordered black coffee, while she chose a latte, and they talked. At first, it was light conversation, what brought him to this part of the city, what she did in her work, but soon, the stories grew more personal. He spoke of life on the road, fixing cars, and the quiet satisfaction of solving problems with his hands. She shared glimpses of her world in the corporate tower, boardrooms, meetings, high-stakes negotiations, but softened the edges, admitting the loneliness that sometimes accompanied success. There was a rhythm to their conversation, a give and take that felt natural. Her laughter came more easily than it had in months, a sound that drew his smile every time. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone was listening, not just hearing, but really listening. She wasn't being judged for her wealth, her status, or her perfection. She was being seen, and it was intoxicating. Between sips of coffee and bites of fries, she noticed little details, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about something he loved, the subtle gestures of care when he reached across the table to move her napkin, the warmth in his smile. Each small movement chipped away at her carefully constructed walls, the barriers she had built around herself to remain in control. By the time dessert arrived, a slice of warm apple pie, they were no longer strangers. There was a shared energy between them, unspoken yet undeniable. She caught herself imagining what it might be like to spend more time with him, to explore this unexpected bond. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She had spent so long in a world where everything was planned, every risk calculated. Now, she felt the allure of unpredictability, of surrendering to something completely new. The night stretched on, but neither seemed to mind. The neon sign outside cast a soft glow on their faces as they lingered in conversation, reluctant to part. She realized that this chance encounter, her car breaking down, being rescued by a stranger, was no accident. Something deeper was unfolding, a connection that neither could have predicted. And in the quiet hum of the diner, the CEO began to understand that perhaps love had found its way to her, in the most unexpected form, the mechanic who had saved her night, and maybe, her heart. Days turned into weeks, and the connection between the CEO and the mechanic deepened in ways neither had expected. What had started as a chance roadside encounter became a series of moments that neither could ignore. She found herself looking forward to seeing him, not for business, not for convenience, but for the warmth in his smile, the way his presence made the world feel lighter. He, in turn, admired her strength, the fierce determination that had built an empire, tempered by her surprising vulnerability. She had let very few people in, yet he felt as though he had always known her. Their conversations grew longer, laughter coming easily, shared silences comfortable and meaningful. It was a rhythm neither had consciously sought, yet it fit perfectly. One evening, the California sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose as they sat on a quiet hill overlooking the city. The breeze carried the scent of salt from the nearby bay, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. He reached for her hand, holding it gently, feeling the tension she always carried in her fingers slowly melt away. "I never thought I'd feel this way," she admitted softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. She had spent her life chasing goals, acquisitions, and deals, but never had she allowed herself to chase something so simple, so human. "Love. Neither did I," he replied, his eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "But sometimes, life has a way of giving you exactly what you need when you least expect it." She smiled, feeling a thrill of happiness that had nothing to do with her achievements or status. It was raw, real, and entirely hers. Her mind, always so focused on control and precision, finally understood that surrendering could be the greatest reward. In the weeks that followed, their bond strengthened. The CEO began seeing life differently, not as a series of tasks and goals, but as moments to savor, people to connect with, and love to embrace. He became a part of her world, a grounding presence that reminded her of the beauty in simplicity, the joy in unpredictability. She started inviting him to events, not as a guest, but as someone she wanted by her side. His world, too, expanded as he glimpsed a life that had once seemed untouchable, discovering warmth, laughter, and acceptance he hadn't anticipated. One evening, standing together on her apartment balcony with the city lights twinkling below, he turned to her. "You've changed since that night on the highway," he said softly, his thumb brushing over hers. "I think we changed each other," she replied, feeling the truth of it settle deep in her chest. She realized that what began with a broken car had led to something far more profound, a love neither had planned, yet both had needed. She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the solidity of his presence, the comfort of being seen, loved, and understood. Her heart, once guarded and hardened by years of control, had finally found a safe place. And in that quiet, perfect moment, she knew she had discovered something priceless, that sometimes, being stranded could lead to finding the person who could truly save you, not just your car, but your heart.